Junior year was actually it was the year that I decided I wanted to switch majors. Very candidly, this is one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life. I knew that there was no possible way that I could graduate in time. Oh, I have to mention, not only was this my junior year of college, this wasn't the beginning of my junior year, this was halfway through my junior year. I started college as a biology major, and at this point, when I started college, I was very, very certain that I wanted to go into some health professions field. My freshman through junior year, I had done a significant amount of shadowing, and also I volunteered in a hospital for about a year. This was before the pandemic started. The more time that progressed while I was doing these things, the more I realized that I did not want to pursue this field. With just a bachelor's degree in biology, it is very difficult to pursue a career. Not only was I not particularly interested in going into a health field, in order to pursue an advanced degree would obviously be very, very expensive, and I didn't really want to put myself in that kind of debt. Obviously, this was a huge bummer for me. All these chemistry classes, physics, now they were essentially elective credits. I chose my decision to switch based on a couple of different factors. I'm not saying this is the correct way to do this. It's really difficult to give advice on this because it is so personal, but I'm going to try to do my best with this one. Number one was I was okay with the idea of prioritizing the financial outcome of a degree over how much I enjoyed that particular topic. And the second factor was I didn't want to pursue a master's degree. And third was I was okay with the major being very challenging. So the degree that ended up fitting all of the criteria was a computer science degree, and that's what I ended up pursuing. I don't have the life experience yet to know if this was the correct decision. Apart from deciding this was the degree I wanted to switch to, there were more logistics. I couldn't just simply switch my degree because they are very in-demand degrees. There are a limited amount of spots for people that want to pursue those degrees, so you have to meet some minimum criteria in order to do that degree. There was technically a time when I was pursuing a major and didn't know if I'd actually be admitted into the major, and sadly enough for me, the only courses I took for my biology degree that counted towards my computer science degree were Calculus 1 and 2. So at this point, it is February 2020, and I'm basically a freshman again in terms of major degree courses. Some of my professors started making classes virtual or not requiring attendance. The school itself did not have any requirements at this time, but I remember having a very distinct feeling that the school was going to shut down. I remember telling people this and then people thinking I was kind of crazy. Having the class be virtual wasn't particularly difficult for me, but what was difficult is when office hours went online, I started having really, really, really intense insomnia. Sleeping problems is actually something I've had since I was about 13. Come college, it started to become much more intense to the point where I would only be able to get a couple hours of sleep at night. I even had blackout curtains at the time, and despite having blackout curtains, if a little bit of light just shined through the crack between the window and the blackout curtains, it would wake me up. Because the sleep deprivation was compounding over months, I felt like my processing speed was half of what it used to be. When the school went online, every single one of my roommates went home with their parents, and so my boyfriend and I had the entire house to ourselves. The living situation was great. The studying situation was not great. School being online actually ended up personally for me being a blessing in disguise for multiple different reasons. I was able to take summer classes for multiple summers while school remained online, and this actually helped me to graduate a year earlier. I saved so much money on rent. That said, being in online school really taught me some lessons, so I wanted to share some not life lessons, but I guess college lessons. Since this was spring and summer, I would be able to exercise outside more. I started cooking more for myself since I had that time, so that helped me. I think being in this with my boyfriend and not having to deal with this all by myself was really helpful. I think it would have been significantly worse if I was in this just on my own. The most unfortunate thing about this that affected me personally, the summer of junior year is normally the summer where you would have some sort of internship, but because this was summer 2020, it was not an option. And same thing for the next year, even summer 2021. I wanted to talk to you a bit about burnout because this is something that I feel like I went through every single semester that I was in college, especially the ones where school was online. When school was in person, I actually used going to the school gym kind of as a crutch to deal with my anxiety. I've had very severe testing anxiety the entire time that I was in college. I actually think that I had it in high school, but I didn't know what it was at the time. When I was writing out what I wanted to talk about in this video, I considered not touching on this at all because I don't really have any advice for it. I don't really think it ever got better. I just graduated college and then didn't have to deal with it anymore. I could honestly talk about this for an entire separate video, so if you want to see a video about how that progressed, how that looked for me, and how that affected me, let me know. I think there's just too much to touch on in this video to actually do the topic justice. Here is what I will say while I was dealing with burnout and testing anxiety at that time. There were two thoughts and specific mindset shifts which helped me to get through this period. The first was that assume you can do things that you don't think you can do. And I don't mean this in a Delulu way, like, oh, assume you can, you know, gamble and win the lottery or something like that. If you think that there's only a 30% chance that you can do something, but it's really important that you do it, assume you can do it. If you do 10 things that you think you only have a 30% chance of being successful at, the odds are that you'll be successful at least one of those things. The second mindset shift that I use was thinking to myself, would my 80-year-old self regret if I didn't continue to attempt this just because it's hard? At some points, my testing anxiety was so bad that I felt like despite how much I studied, how much work I put into it, my performance was completely dependent on how my anxiety manifested that particular day. The next semester, my boyfriend actually lived with me in my room in my parents' house. His first full-time job was virtual, so he still lived with me in my room during that time while I was still doing my degree. This was also the time when I started, I would call it my fashion makeover. I was really unhappy at this point in my life regarding school and my general career trajectory. I knew that I was progressing, but because that was terrible. But because there was no physical representation of that in the way that there is when you finish finals in person, there's not that energy, so it kind of felt stagnant even though it wasn't. On my fashion channel, you can see the progression of how my style changed. I think having this physical change was really good for me. Then in summer 2021, I started what I refer to as my New York City free trial. My boyfriend started his second full-time job in summer 2021, and this required him to relocate to New York City. Because of that and school still being online at this time, I spent a lot of time in New York City. And I say this as I'm recording this video in a New York City apartment, so clearly I'm still here. City life obviously isn't for everyone, but if you like the idea of city life, I cannot even begin to explain how euphoric just moving to New York City is, especially if you came from a very boring suburban area like I did. I lived within driving distance of New York City, so I was able to take a bus when I went to see my boyfriend rather than having to pay for a plane or something. These are my final tips for online studying. One, I got one of those fold-out bed desks. I think we all had an experience during the pandemic where we were just sitting in a chair all day. I know personally it caused me a lot of back pain and I liked working on my bed, but I didn't want to be like hunched over like this typing on my laptop. And I also liked physically moving around locations. Sometimes I'd work in the kitchen, sometimes I'd work in our living room, just because sitting in one room all day, the days would sort of blend together. Also at this time, doing something very simple like going to our local grocery store to get Gatorade or an energy drink, something that's very low cost, very affordable, but a chance to leave the house helped me a lot. I had two living situations when school went back in person. The first one, my sister actually ended up going to the same university as me. So there was a semester when we rented a house together. It was a 3-story house, but the way the landlord had set it up, he rented out each individual level. They had their own, you know, lock and key. So I actually never met the other people in the house, but my sister lived together on the top floor. It was very small, but it had its own kitchen, its own bathroom, and we each had our own individual room. Every time we chose a house, it was always the most affordable option that wasn't a complete dumpster. Oh my God, there's a situation where the landlord was trying to rent out a house that was so bad that there was a hole in the ceiling. It smelled like mold. It was nasty. The second situation was my most recent one, where I lived in a house renting out my own room, but I had 7 roommates. 2 of the rooms in that house, I believe, were previously a garage, which had been converted to a bedroom. Since I just graduated, I wanted to give you some advice on what to do your senior year before you graduate. Your senior year is when you get the opportunity to delve into more unique topics. I personally chose which topics to go into based on which professors had the best rating, and this is what I'd recommend. You probably already know this. Networking is extremely important while you're in college if you can do that. I'd recommend connecting with people in your major on LinkedIn before you graduate. While you're still paying tuition, have someone look over your resume, edit it, make it look more professional. Take advantage of all of these services before you graduate. If you want to see more in-depth videos about anything I mentioned here, burnout, testing anxiety, or anything I mentioned in the previous 2 parts, please let me know. I want to start making a lot more advice videos. Okay, bye.